the game is there's so much that's been put out there. You're just kind of all over the place, so just rock with me for a little bit. First of all, I want to get the elephant out of the room. Just to be clear, both of you provided deposition testimony, and in your depositions, neither one of you ever stated that President Joe Biden interfered with your investigations, correct?
The transcript doesn't include that, no.
Yeah, the transcript does not include that.
Nor does it include that Merrick Garland interfered with your investigations, correct?
The transcript does not say that, no.
Thank you. The reason that I say that is because it's the insinuation that this committee is trying to make, or at least one side of this committee is trying to make, is that for some reason there was interference, and my colleagues continue to make sure that they outline the fact that this investigation actually started under the Trump administration. So that's the reason about who appointed who comes up. But at the end of the day, we have no evidence whatsoever that the president nor the Attorney General of the United States interfered. But I also want to make sure that we outline some legal principles, since we've got so many newfound prosecutors today on this committee. Number one, just to be clear, just because you investigate something, it doesn't necessarily mean that there will be a conviction, correct?
That's correct.
That is correct.
Okay. In fact, in our criminal justice system, you are cloaked in a presumption of innocence. That is what happens under the Constitution, okay? So we all have a role to play. Your role is investigative, correct?
Correct.
All right. So then you have an AUSA, who usually is the one that is responsible for taking the evidence. Actually, they probably have an investigator in their office. There's usually an investigator that is directly within their office that will review any documentation that you provide, and then they will sit down and talk to the AUSA's office about recommendations, like what the charges will look like and things like that. Is that not correct?
If that's correct, I've never seen that.
Okay. Well, let me be clear. There is a level after you get done with your investigation in which the U.S. Attorney's Office then will look at the evidence that you've provided, and they will make decisions, correct?
Yes, and they all four assigned attorneys agreed with recommending felony and misdemeanor tax charges.
I heard your testimony before. I'm not going to dispute that. The difference is I've done the defense side of this before. Mm-hmm. So as far as I'm concerned, it sounds like a sweetheart deal, because I've never pled anyone to every single count of a federal indictment in the first place, unless they only had one count. I have always negotiated, and unlike on the state level, I typically do my negotiations a lot of times before there's even an indictment, because a lot of times my clients are actually turning evidence over and all kinds of things. But the thing is, those conversations have never taken place with an investigator. They always take place with the U.S. attorney. So the point is, you don't have the ultimate charging authority. The people that did, they decided to do what they decided to do for whatever reasons, correct?
So in my experience, I've always been a part of that, at that table, talking to the AUSA and talking about the charging decisions. So that's not accurate to say that I'm not,
so for this,
investigator is not involved in that
so
process.
This time it was a little different for you, and that's why you felt as if something was wrong. But I want to get to something else really quickly. I want to talk about what we should be prosecuting. We should be looking at the fact that in 2017, Trump's first year in office, he also made $6.5 million from China, his tax returns show. The source of the China payments is not clear from the returns. The payments were a surprise, since Trump is an outspoken critic of the $5.8 million that Hunter Biden made. The difference is Trump was our president when he made this money from China, whereas I'm sure you would agree with me, Hunter Biden has always been a private citizen. We've got a lot of other stuff. In fact, it's clear that Trump never paid more than $750 in taxes for, I want to say, a total of like 2 years of his taxes, which is absolutely insane. But we also know that it showed that Trump claimed large cash donations to charities, but the report said the IRS did not verify them. The report also said that while Trump's tax filings were large and complicated, the IRS does not appear to have signed experts to work on them. That is shameful. In addition to that, we heard testimony earlier that talked about whether or not you executed a search warrant under Section 913.420 of the DOJ's Justice Manual. It specifically states that when searching the premises of an attorney that is the subject of an investigation, prosecutors are expected to take the least intrusive approach consistent with vigorous and effective law enforcement. It's kind of what they did for Trump when they gave him a number of opportunities to turn over the documents, our national secrets, that he kept in the toilet. But he chose not to, and that's why he is facing federal charges down in Florida. And finally, I just want to make sure that we clear up something about the Central Park 5, because I don't think my colleague from the other side of the aisle understands that not only were they found to be not guilty, they were paid $41 million in a 2014 settlement because their civil rights in that lawsuit were violated. In addition to that, we do know that one of the Central Park 5 now serves on city council, Yusuf Salam. So I ask unanimous consent that I allow this
Without
New York Times
objection to
article be
ordered and
admitted.
the lady's time's expired, but would the lady yield to a quick question?
So who?
Would you yield to a question?
Yes.
You made the argument that Trump received $6 million from China or something, and Hunter Biden received the money from China. Do you know exactly what Hunter Biden did to receive the money from China? Because that's something we've had a hard time trying to figure out. I think I know what Trump's businesses were. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I just know what his businesses are. I don't know what the Biden's businesses are.
And you don't know what it's not.
Well,
I'm sorry?
And you don't know what it's not either.
But what I'll say.
So you have no idea why or why not he received that money.
What I will say is,
You have no evidence about it.
Can I submit this MSNBC or this NBC article for the record as well?
Without objection, so ordered.
And I will say that in this article, it specifically says that the source of a number of Trump's monies, it was unclear. He just said that he did have businesses there. He did say that he had opened some bank accounts in China, but they could not find the source of the monies that were paid to him from China.
Chair recognizes Mr. Turner from Kansas for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you both for being here today. There's a lot of information. Let's try to quickly lay this out for the American people, okay? So quick answers. How long have each of you worked for the IRS? Mr. Shapley, you first.
14 years.
13 years.
Is it fair to say that you both have had successful careers at the IRS? You've both been recognized for your achievement there?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are either of you overly partisan people?
I am not, no.
Yeah, I've made an effort to not be overly, like, I've made an effort to be partisan. I apologize.
Do either of you have a burning desire, or have you ever, to be a spectacle at a congressional hearing? Are you wanting to be on TV? Are you looking for your 15 minutes of fame here?
I would prefer not to be here.
Yeah, I'd never imagined that this would happen, but here I am.
Then quickly, for the American people, why did you step forward?
Because we need the equal application of justice, and we hear all these stories about these crimes that are committed that are horrible. But without the equal application of justice, I don't understand how we move forward, and I don't understand how I meet my oath of office if I don't do what I can to ensure that occurs. There are 300 million taxpayers out there that they think that this hearing is a big deal because they're paying their taxes and they see someone who isn't.
And Mr. Ziegler?
So it's a matter of accountability. So it's twofold. A matter of accountability. We need to hold those accountable who basically for the last 5 years hasn't been following proper procedure. And the second part of this is that I think we need to have some reform or something that's built in there that this doesn't happen to people again, investigators.
Let's get the facts out. The Biden family and their associates received millions in global payments from companies linked to Ukraine, Romania, and China, funneled through various shell companies. Mr. Ziegler, is that correct?
That is correct. It's $17.3 million.
Quickly, Mr. Shapley, what is a special agent report?
It's the report that recommends prosecution for various charges, each of which have been proven, each element.
Approximately how many of these over your career have you been a part of or have you prepared? Guess.
Hundreds.
Hundreds. Did you complete a special agent report for the Hunter Biden case?
Special Agent Ziegler authored that report.
I completed that report.
And when this special report was sent up the chain of command, just like you all have been involved with, in your case, Mr. Shapley, hundreds of times. Did you notice anything outside of the normal process that you have grown used to over the years?
So the changing at criminal tax attorneys was definitely inappropriate and out of the norm. But no, after that, the senior leadership quickly trumped CT Counsel, and they concurred with the charges, so we sent it forward to the Department of Justice Tax Division for further approval.
And Mr. Ziegler?
Everything that he just said was correct.
Now, Mr. Shapley, you recommended felony charges in this special agent report, and we all know the answer, but was Hunter Biden ultimately charged with those felonies?
No, he was not.
Mr. Ziegler, what role did Leslie Wolf play in the investigation?
So she was an assistant United States attorney out of the District of Delaware assigned to the investigation.
You met with her and her team during the Hunter Biden case, correct?
That is correct.
In your testimony to Ways and Means, you describe Assistant U.S. Attorney Leslie Wolf, who was once again overseeing the case out of Delaware, as saying during a meeting that she did not want to ask about the big guy and stated she didn't want to ask questions about Dad. Is that statement accurate? And I want to remind you that you're under oath. Is that accurate, your testimony to Ways and Means?
Can you ask that question one more time so I can?
She said, Leslie Wolf said, during a meeting that she did not want to ask about the big guy and stated she didn't want to ask questions about Dad.
So there's twofold to that. There's that line in the email that said 10 held by H for the big guy. That was something that came up as a part of us reviewing what we were going to say during that day, and she immediately says, no, we're not going to ask that, and then we essentially had to argue our stance on why we should ask it,
Okay.
And then it was ultimately that we didn't know, it was unknown.
I appreciate that. Mr. Shapley, you stated in public interviews that you and your team were stopped from taking certain investigative steps that you believe could have potentially connected this Hunter Biden case to President Biden. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, I just want to summarize as quickly as I can here. We have two credible, nonpartisan IRS investigators confirming that there are millions of dollars in foreign payments to shell companies to the Biden administration. We have Hunter Biden, who most of us wouldn't hire to dog sit, receiving these millions of dollars for services that they cannot come forward and tell us about, and that potentially this is linked to President Biden, but we don't know that for a fact because you were shut down. You were not allowed to pursue the investigative angle that you wanted to. This is something that we have to get to the bottom of. It's shameful what's happening, and I want folks to mark my words that we will not be stifled. This committee will not be stifled by the Department of Justice or anyone in the Biden administration. We are going to pursue this and get to the bottom of this no matter what. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Chair recognizes Mr. Gomez for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I just want to be clear, whistleblower allegations should be taken seriously, period. I had a whistleblower approach my office during my first term. But one of the things I learned from that is that there's a clear, fact-based process that needs to be followed to ensure a whistleblower investigation is executed properly without political interference. This is not what is happening here today. Where this originated in Ways and Means, Republicans threw that process into the gutter. Here's how. One, there were more than 50 people identified in the Ways and Means Committee's depositions on this same topic that were not spoken to and not interviewed before the Republican majority released these allegations to the public. They didn't take the time to check their fact. And the Republicans even admitted during questioning that they never interviewed or asked questions or sought to ask questions of these individuals. Instead, Republicans cherry-picked 13 people who they knew agreed to corroborate their claims. Why wouldn't they conduct a thorough investigation and interview all people identified who might have information in this case? There are more than 50 people who weren't given the opportunity to defend their names, respond to allegations, or give this inquiry important context and facts. Two, the whistleblower transcript contains unauthenticated, unverified documents from unknown searches on the internet. The exhibit used by the gentleman from Ohio in the early part of this hearing is one of those unverified documents pulled from the internet, yet they treat it as a smoking gun. You can literally find anything on the internet. That doesn't make it true, and Republicans refuse to verify their sources. They are trying to give the appearance that these documents are from IRS files provided by the whistleblower or from some trusted source, but in fact, they are not. These documents are unauthenticated, and we don't even know their real source. What kind of basis is this for a serious investigation? 3, the majority released this transcript with all these errors I cited to the public before verifying any of these allegations. They put the cart far before the horse, declining to speak to over dozens of valuable witnesses, refusing to verify the information they pushed to the public, throwing this whole process and its credibility out the window. Additionally, this process has been tainted by the fact that one of these whistleblowers' attorneys has made substantial contributions to the Republican chairman of Ways and Means as recently as February of this year. And one of these whistleblowers didn't even come voluntarily. He was asked to testify by his supervisor. None of this inspires confidence in these efforts of my colleagues across the aisle or in the process that has been taken. If my colleagues were serious about these allegations, they would have gone through the proper steps to ensure this investigation was done correctly, but they didn't. They rather dragged this investigation and this committee into the gutter, and that was proved by the gentlewoman from Georgia. If the gutter is where they choose to live, and the only purpose of this hearing is to drag us all down there with them, I don't want any part of it. I ask for unanimous consent to submit for the record a letter from Ways and Means Ranking Member Richard Neal outlining the improper steps taken by the majority in this investigation.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. With that, I'd like to yield my remaining time to Mr. Goldman of New York.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. Gentlemen, I want to return to the Washington Post October 6th article, and I'd ask unanimous consent to enter it in the record. In your testimony, Mr. Shapley, before the Ways and Means Committee, you stated, quote, "There was a leak. It appeared to come from the agent's level, who was critical of the prosecutors for not charging the case." What you testified earlier was a little different. Which one do you stand by today?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
There was a leak. It appeared to come from the agent's level, who was critical of the prosecutors for not charging the case.
Yeah, so, yeah, it appeared because it said it came from the agent's level, but the source was a source familiar with the topic, and it didn't say it was a law enforcement source.
Okay, it seems to be a distinction, I think, without a difference. And then you understand that obviously leaks of grand jury information is a felony, right?
Leaking and investigative information includes 6103 would be a felony, yes.
Well, that's true as well. So would you agree that there would be some skepticism from any prosecutors about which of the agents may be the source of a leak?
And gentlemen, time's expired, but feel free to answer the question.
Oh, since there have been multiple leaks in this investigation, and the one on December 8th or December 9th, 2020, that appeared to have come from someone, as Leslie Wolf stated.
I was just asking about October 6th, 2022.
So, I
It would cause anyone's suspicion, right?
If it says it comes from agent level?
Yeah, that's what you said.
Gentlemen, time's expired. You're the next questioner after Mr. Fallon from Texas for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're just talking about obfuscating and diverting and distracting and spin and a whole lot of word vomit from the other side of the aisle. It makes no sense as to what we're here for today. And you hear a lot of Trump, 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 Rudy Giuliani, Giuliani, Giuliani. We're not talking about either of those gentlemen today. I want to thank both the witnesses for being here. I think it's been established that you're very credible, you're very experienced, you're subject matter experts at what you do. Mr. Shapley, you led a team of 12 elite agents in this investigation. How long were you investigating the sportsman, the Hunter Biden investigation? How long did you lead it for?
I started in January of 2020.
Okay, so 2 to 3 years?
That's correct.
Okay. You both, I'm sure, are aware that one of Hunter Biden's lawyers has accused you of having axes to grind and that you're disgruntled agents. Mr. Shapley, are you a political activist?
I am not, no.
You are not. Mr. Ziegler, are you a part of the MAGA movement?
I am not.
You're not. Okay, thank you. So I have to ask you a direct question, and it's an important one. Are you two out to get Hunter Biden, or are you out to get justice?
It's all about justice here, and that's why, a plea agreement, when people ask me to comment about the plea agreement, it's just, it
Mr.
is what
Ziegler?
it is outside of my control.
Justice, or you want to get Hunter?
It's justice.
Thank you. Okay. So the ranking member, who was a rather skilled orator, rather bombastically claimed when he was speaking earlier that this is all, and I quote, normal stuff, and there's no evidence that Hunter Biden received preferential treatment. So, Mr. Ziegler, do you agree with those statements? That this investigation was normal stuff, nothing out of the ordinary, and that Hunter Biden didn't receive any preferential treatment?
Based on my transcript, I would believe that answer would be, or that question would be incorrect.
Would you fair to say that you vehemently disagree with those statements?
I don't think it changes my perspective of it. All I can say is that we came forward with the information of slow
Right.
walking, not following the investigative steps, and
So it was out of the ordinary.
yeah.
Okay. Mr. Shapley, do you agree with those statements or disagree with them?
Yes, this was out of the ordinary.
Okay. So when you read your transcribed interviews, which are pretty massive in and of themselves, it's clear that the levels of interference and roadblocks that the DOJ and other federal government personnel put in front of you was astounding, if not unprecedented. In these pages, I was utterly shocked to see how an assistant U.S. attorney stonewalled and scuttled your investigation. So let's go back. It's December of 2020. The prosecutorial team is meeting to discuss next steps. Hunter Biden has received millions of dollars in foreign payments. One of his shell companies, Wasco, to this day, no one can tell what the hell it ever did other than accept money. So nobody knows what services the company's ever provided, and it's December of 2020. Hunter is vacating Wasco's DC offices, and he's moving those documents to a storage unit in Northern Virginia. Mr. Shapley, were you pretty interested in what some of those documents might reveal?
Yes, we were.
Okay. And maybe possibly could have shedded light on criminal activity, felony criminal activity?
Unfettered access to the documents there before defense counsel can filter them and would have been very advantageous.
Could have been a treasure trove, we don't know, okay, because of what happened later. So I'm going to get that in a second. So did you prepare an affidavit to search that storage unit?
Yeah, I was the one that prepared
Okay,
that.
Mr. Ziegler did that. Did U.S. Attorney Weiss agree that if the unit wasn't accessed for 30 days, then you could execute the warrant?
That's correct.
Okay, so now that in and of itself seems kind of weird, though, doesn't it, to wait 30 days? And is somebody, how are you going to know if somebody accesses it? You can have is it going to be under 24-hour surveillance? Is it going to be a stakeout? Are we going to have to call Emilio Estevez and Richard Dreyfuss and have them there with the binoculars checking things out?
So it wasn't in the transcript, but this was a little bit a unique location where it would have been easier than what you just described. Okay. See if it was accessed.
But you didn't have to wait the 30 days, did you? Because did Assistant U.S. Attorney Leslie Wolf, what did she do when she learned that you wanted to execute the search warrant on this storage unit?
So she actually first approved and was saying that it's going to take approvals for us to get this done, but then came back a few days later and said, no, we're not going to move forward with this. And I was the one who proposed, well, let's just wait 30 days, we'll get the approvals, we will make sure that the storage unit is not accessed, and then we can move forward with the warrant. Her response was, I'm going to think about it. And then we come to find out a few days later that they had let defense counsel know that we know about the storage unit.
Okay, so that's key. So a U.S. attorney tipped off the lawyers of a person who was the subject of a years-long criminal felony investigation. Is that what you're saying? Did Leslie Wolf tip off Hunter Biden's lawyers?
Regarding
The storage unit, that you guys had interest in the storage unit. Because once you know that, if you're the subject of a criminal investigation, any of those documents that can incriminate you are probably going to meet a match and some gasoline. So that's astounding to me, that is direct evidence, clearly, of preferential treatment, and that is not normal stuff. Is that normal?
So I can tell you that was actually my kind of red line situation, a little bit different than how Shapley refers to it, but I didn't think we had a seat at the table. It was just, it disappointed me so badly, but I knew this was something that we were up against, and that it was like, okay, that's what they decided to do.
Have either of you ever seen anything like that before in your decades of experience?
And gentlemen, time's expired, but please feel free to answer the question.
No, I have not.
I have not either.
Well, I want to thank you. I think you're both excellent public servants and you're courageous. And justice is the only thing I want to be blind. Not our Democratic colleagues, not the legacy media, and certainly not top administration officials. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Chair recognizes Mr. Goldman from New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd love to get the extra minute that Mr. Fallon got as well. Thank you guys for being here today. We don't have a lot of time here. I have a lot of questions. If I cut you off, I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just trying to get through them. And I want to talk a little bit about the evidence you did have. Mr. Ziegler, you were the case agent. So how many documents would you say you gathered during the 5-year investigation?
So, however, I do believe I may have documents. I am limited by the statute, but I would be more than welcome to turn those documents
No, I don't
over
need
to
them. How many? Just the number.
It was a significant amount of documents. I apologize.
Hundreds of thousands? Millions?
I don't want to put a number to it, but there was a lot.
Right. Bank records, right? You had a lot of bank records,
Yes,
both domestic and foreign,
that is correct.
and you conducted search warrants?
Yes, there was reference in our transcripts to conducting electronic search warrants.
And did you do other search warrants as well?
When you say other search warrants, what do you mean?
Any other search warrants? Electric, otherwise, physical?
So I'm going to stick to what I stated in my transcript. There were multiple electronic search warrants.
And
that
you
we
said that you
executed.
conducted more than 60 interviews as part of this investigation, is that right?
That is correct.
That's a lot for any investigation, right? For
I
a
w-
tax investigation?
I wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
I would say that
All right, in
more-
my 10 years, I don't know how many investigations I did with 60 interviews. So I want to focus, though, for a second on the WhatsApp that we went through. And Mr. Shapley, in your testimony, your opening statement, you said that the text message, the WhatsApp message that we've been talking about, shows Hunter Biden discussing business with his father. Could you show me where in the text message it says anything about discussing business with Joe Biden?
So if you'd like me to go through it, I mean, I can take time to review it if you'd like me to.
Well, I don't have the time, unfortunately, as you point out. I will tell you the only thing it says about it is that Hunter Biden was sitting with his father. It does not say anything about discussing any business. And Mr. Shapley, you also said in your testimony, and we've talked about this a bunch, that the agents were prohibited from pursuing leads related to Joe Biden and the big guy, but the agents did that anyway, right? Interviewing Rob Walker.
Agents interviewed Rob Walker.
And they
did
asked him
not
about
use
that, right?
The word big.
Right, they didn't use the word big guy, but they asked about it in reference to that text. And do you recall that Rob Walker actually said in response to that he was not aware that Joe Biden was ever a part of anything that he and Hunter were doing?
That's what the witness said, yes.
Yes. And then you describe a lunch, what we talked about earlier, where Joe Biden came to say hello at the Four Seasons Hotel to lunch that he was having with CEFC executives, right?
That's correct.
But what you didn't talk about is what Rob Walker said the origination of that lunch was. And you testified that he said that Hunter told his dad, according to Rob Walker, quote, "I may be trying to start a company or try to do something with these guys." Now let me ask you something. That doesn't sound much like Joe Biden was involved in whatever Hunter Biden was doing with the CEFC if Hunter Biden is telling him that he's trying to do business with them, does it?
No, but it does show that he told his father he was trying to do business, and he was
Okay,
talking
well,
to his
that is
father
true. Hunter Biden
about the
does
business.
try to do business. That's correct. Yes. So you not only have no direct evidence connecting Joe Biden to any of Hunter Biden's business deal, you actually had proof that he wasn't involved. That is the proof that you had. And in the end of the day, that this was a 5-year criminal investigation with tens of thousands of documents, maybe hundreds of thousands, unusual warrants, aggressive techniques, you wrote a report recommending felony charges. It went to DOJ tax. They wrote a 99-page memo, approval memo, right? And neither of you saw that, did you?
That's correct.
That is correct.
And what was their recommendation?
So all I know
Approval,
is,
discretion, or declination?
so I have to stick to the
Okay,
confines of...
you testified that it was discretion, which means that it wasn't an approval, it was to the discretion of the U.S. Attorney's Office, which had that DOJ tax memo, which had information from the defense lawyers that they spoke with, and they are the ones who have to prove this case in court. And I will tell you, as a federal prosecutor for 10 years, and I worked with many of your colleagues who do great work, and I'm sure you do great work as well. But I never met an agent who didn't want to charge every possible case. But what I noticed in 5 hours of testimony today is that neither one of you has ever mentioned a portion of the case that may not be so strong, or may be suspect, or may have a defense. And that's because that's what the prosecutor has to think about before charging a case. And that is not what the special agent report does.
Gentleman's
So,
time's
in the end-
expired. He went a minute over. Chair now recognizes Mr. Perry from Pennsylvania.
I thank the chairman. Mr. Shapley, if you can turn to page 30 of your transcript, and I want to say to Mr. Shapley and Mr. Ziegler, we sure appreciate you coming forward. I think, look, we've heard of alleged so-called whistleblowers in the past. They couldn't reveal themselves, and it led to an improper impeachment of a president that was unjustified and unsubstantiated. So I really do credit you. I think this has probably been very, very difficult and a hard choice for you to make, but I think it was the right one, and I commend you for it. Mr. Shapley, page 30 of your transcript, let me see, middle of the page, last sentence, second paragraph, starting with every single day. Every single day was a battle to do our jobs. Now, I understand that in Congress, but you're following the letter of the law, you're taking in information, you're doing, prescribes you do this, and you get that. Why is your day, that's a chilling line. What did you mean when you said that?
So yeah, every time we tried to communicate investigative steps and get support for investigative steps, it was always slow walked. It was always pushed off that we needed a PIN's DOJ Public Integrity's approval or DOJ OEO's approval, and it was just used as a crutch. The process was really used to stall the investigation, and ultimately, as and these, which some people seem to be overlooking, is that these prosecutors agreed with these charges.
And you finally reached your red line. You said previous in answer Mr. Fallon's question, you were seeking justice. I believe you were. I don't think you were picking winners and losers, just seeking to see who's following the rules. You finally reached your red line October 7th of 2022 at the meeting with U.S. Attorney Weiss. Is that a reasonable characterization?
Yeah, that's correct.
And what did you mean when you say you reached your red line?
So throughout the investigation, starting in the summer of 2020, my case agents were coming to me with certain concerns, and because we were worried about the discovery process, with agents turning over documents at the end of the investigation, we wanted to protect that investigation. So I documented them on a recurring basis, issues that we were having. And it was after discussions with my agents. I also saw these things firsthand. So we got to the point, it's a heavy burden. Like, I have a very deep respect for the Department of Justice and AUSAs and U.S. attorneys I've worked with in the past. And I just couldn't, to ultimately conclude that they were doing the wrong thing was just such a high burden.
Yeah, you concluded that. And Mr. Ziegler, your red line, I think you said, I don't want to mischaracterize, was a little later, December 14th, 2020, when AUSA Wolf tips off the Biden counsel about your plan to search the storage unit. Is that right? Or
Absolutely, because that storage unit, the method that we were planning to do was the least intrusive. It was a storage unit. We wanted to get, we needed to get those records.
And again, you were just seeking justice, right? Seeking the truth.
Absolutely.
Truth's going to take you wherever it takes you. Make decisions based on what you learn. Turning back to you, Mr. Shapley, what was your agency's leadership's response when you tried to alert officials outside your chain of command?
So most recently, when Special Agent Ziegler emailed the commissioner, they basically threatened and intimidated Special Agent Ziegler that he had violated some type of law.
Threatened and intimidated.
And forced him, this chain of command. requirement that does not meet the legal requirement.
So you're trying to seek justice, you're trying to seek the truth, and they're throwing an obstruction in front of you. They're obstructing you from doing it, aren't they?
So my complaints for IRS criminal investigation and senior leadership is not necessarily for blocking this investigation. I do believe that we raise things on a continual basis, and they just stuck their head in the sand and took no action. But in terms of the retaliation, that's when they first reared their head. And there's no doubt about it that after protected disclosures were made, that they took prohibitive personnel practices against me.
Mr. Shapley, Mr. Ziegler, have you ever been threatened before in an investigation?
I have not, and I've come to learn that this 6E grand jury threat may have happened before to other people inside the IRS.
Mr. Shapley?
No, not from my own agency, not from
Yeah, so
the team.
when my friends on the other side of the aisle say that Treasury hasn't retaliated against you, it's simply not true. There's a law, 5 U.S.C. 2303B13, and they placed unlawfully you and your fellow supervisors under a gag order. Mr. Shapley and Mr. Ziegler, my time has expired, but what we're talking about here is obstruction of justice. Obstruction, you were seeking justice and you were obstructed. It's against the law. Mr. Chairman, I yield the balance.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognize Mr. Moskowitz from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And gentlemen, thank you for appearing today. Thank you for being a public servant. And there should be no retaliation against you as whistleblowers. Unlike my colleagues that said nothing and supported President Trump when he retaliated and fired Vindman, and escorted him from the building for appearing in an investigation. That shouldn't happen to you. But of course, they said nothing when it happened to other people. We heard a lot about the Bidens, the Biden family, Biden associates, right? Bidens, plural, the S, what does the apostrophe mean? But not Joe Biden. Didn't hear a lot about Joe Biden. Why? Because he didn't do anything. This has nothing to do with him. You know, my colleagues talked about foreign countries, foreign entities, trying to make it all scary for the American people. Of course, President Trump got $5.4 million from the Chinese while he was president because they were leasing space in Trump Tower. He goes out and air kisses President Xi, totally perfect. Jared Kushner gets $2 billion from the Saudis, even though he oversaw Mideast peace, totally kosher. Ivanka Trump, she's doing business with the Chinese while she's working in the White House, totally beautiful, right? Why do I bring that up? They want to say you have credibility. The problem is they have none. They have no credibility. And because you're here at their behest, their lack of their credibility questions your credibility. Not because of you personally, but because of what they've done over the last several years. So the chairman says you're credible. You want to know actually what they feel about you? People like you who work in government. I got pages of it. It goes on for years. But you know what? I'll just read a couple of adjectives. Trump has called people like you, so-called whistleblowers, fake whistleblowers, partisan people, political hack jobs, scams, frauds, traitors, cowards, spies, losers, clowns, thugs, puppets, unelected bureaucrats, the swamp, and my favorite, the deep state. By the way, you members of the deep state? You members of the deep state? Did you stop paying? It's a rhetorical question. Did you stop paying your deep state dues? Did you not attend the latest deep state meeting? Is that why you're not in the deep state? I can't tell when they want people like yourself to be in the deep state, not in the deep state, depending upon what the deep state is saying. Again, it undermines their credibility. It undermines government. It undermines the Americans' trust in government. It undermines our institutions. And throughout all of this, for years, 4 years of it, they said nothing. And now, in an effort to own Hunter Biden, okay, they're assembling nude photos of him, right? Having some intern have to sit in a room and blow up these photos and put it on poster board and figure out, which ones are beyond the pale. Mr. Shapley, you said that the DOJ was slowing down the investigation. But some of that happened when President Trump was president. And I found it strange that when my colleague tried to ask both of you these questions about when your perceived slowness of this happened, you all struggled for a period of time to admit that it started under President Trump. Was President Trump directing that DOJ to slow down the investigation? He wasn't, just like President Biden isn't now. So if there's any perceived issues with DOJ, it's with DOJ. It's not with the president. Mr. Ziegler, you said no one's above the law regardless of political affiliation. Do you think the president's son-in-law, not as an IRS agent, as a person, do you think the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who worked in the White House, couldn't get security clearance until the president made it happen, was put in charge of Mideast peace, and with no investment experience got $2 billion from the Saudis? You guys made a lot of noise today about $17 million. But what about $2 billion? Do you think as a person that should be looked at? Sounds a little strange.
Congressman, thank you for that question. Given the statute, I am limited to my testimony
I understand. I got it. But think about it. $2 billion from a foreign country that he was put in charge of their policy while he worked in the White House. They got no questions about that. That's totally great, totally wonderful, right? You know, Joe Biden has been in Washington for almost 50 years. We didn't hear about Hunter until like a couple of years ago. Why? Because it's a pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, like the Wizard of Oz, right? Donald Trump is in so much trouble, and they can't save him. But what they can do is they can spend taxpayer money and all the time while they control these hearings to convince the American people that somehow Joe Biden has done something wrong, but there's no evidence. None, zero, zilch, nada, zippo. And you know how I know that? Because they couldn't even bring up their own impeachment. They had to bury it in committee on immigration, not on this topic, right? There are members of this committee that filed articles of impeachment, didn't bring it up for a vote, buried it in committee. Again, not on this topic, because there's no evidence on Joe Biden. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Chair recognizes Ms. Boebert from Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. I appreciate you. Now, if Mr. Shapley, Mr. Ziegler, if you could each just quickly, maybe 20 seconds or less, summarize what did each of you find when you criminally investigated Hunter and Joe Biden, particularly as it relates to China?
So specifically related to China, there's CEFC, Hudson West 3, State Energy HK. Yeah, those are, I believe, the three entities in my transcript.
Mr. Shapley?
So yeah, I mean, I would just echo the same thing that's in my transcript.
And so there's a Yi Jinping, a Chinese billionaire, and he's tied to a CCP intelligence gathering agency, and his company is CEFC, excuse me. What is the connection between Hunter Biden and CFC?
So I'm going to have to stick to the confines of my testimony, but what I can tell you is that there may be some documents that are responsive to that, and then I can turn those over to the House Ways and Means Committee and then get those over.
Yes.
Or if they would vote to get those released.
Yes, we would love to get those in. And I see that Hunter Biden received more than $8 million in foreign payments, including $100,000 made from CEFC directly, $664,000 from State Energy HK, as you mentioned, another Chinese company, and a $325,000 capital contribution made into Bohai Harvest on Hunter's behalf, a Chinese equity investment fund. Were you shocked to find that the then vice president's son received all of these payments, particularly the ones from Chinese entities?
Well, as I tried to state earlier, in this position you have to be nonpartisan. It isn't a matter of shock, it's just
well, it's not the
political
position, not the party, but just the vice president's son. So I'm not accusing you of a political bias here.
So it's just follow the evidence, see where the transactions are coming from, interview witnesses, and try to figure out what the purpose of those transfers of money were for.
And Mr. Shapley, in March of 2017, Robinson Walker LLC received a $3 million wire from a Chinese company, State Energy HK Limited, which took place just 2 months after Joe Biden left office as vice president. And I believe it was in your testimony that you said that it seemed that this would be getting into place, or it was in a testimony that was said today, that this would be being assembled before he left office, and then just shortly after it came to fruition. So can you quickly discuss the Robinson Walker connection to the Biden family?
So, yeah, I mean, I'd have to defer to Special Agent Ziegler.
Okay.
I don't think I spoke about the $3 million.
Yeah, so any of that information related to the $3 million, we can turn over to the House Ways and Means Committee, and they can vote to release that to you.
Thank you. And I see that Hunter Biden and Gongwen Dong, a CEFC associate, established Hudson West 3 LLC, and each owned 50% of the company. Between August 2017 and October 2018, Hudson West 3 sent over $4 million to Hunter Biden and over $75,000 to James Biden, Hunter Biden's uncle. Now, can you discuss these payments? Because my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are wondering what the apostrophe is when we're talking about the Bidens, and it seems there are more Bidens right here who are receiving money.
So in an answer to his question regarding President Biden, and in an answer to this question, any documents that we believe that we may have in our possession, we can turn over to the House Ways and Means Committee. They can vote to release it to you guys.
Okay, I request that you release those to them. And then also, we have the situation with Gal Luft, that he was doing business with CEFC, and I guess that makes you a Chinese spy, so I guess Hunter Biden is a Chinese spy according to their allegations. But do you have any information regarding Gal Luft that you could also turn over to the Ways and Means Committee?
So any information that I have in my case file, at the direction of my attorney, we can turn over to the House Ways and Means
Thank you so much. I appreciate you, gentlemen, for being here, your bravery, your courage for standing up. You know, we saw a lot of evidence today about millions of dollars being shuffled through these shell companies. We've seen delayed warrants to impact a 2020 election. Prosecutors instructed not to involve the big guy because optics. Well, the optics are very, very clear. Hunter Biden sold access to his father with an influence peddling scheme, which in my opinion compromises the current president of the United States. The Biden family has never sold anything in their life but their influence in Washington, D.C. Every business they have is monetizing their grift of the American people. Thank you for making that very clear today, gentlemen. I yield.
Gentlelady yields back. Chair now recognizes Ms. McClain from Michigan.
Thank you guys for being here. I know it's been a long day, but we appreciate you. The American people appreciate you. To get some truth and honesty back in the American justice system, I think is great. So thank you again. We've heard a lot of rhetoric today, and I just want to talk about as much as we can, just the facts, just stick to the facts. So, Mr. Shapley, in August of 2020, your team obtained a July 2017 WhatsApp message from Hunter Biden to Zaho, a Chinese businessman, and I want to read a few lines from that message. I'm sure you remember it, but I'll just refresh your memory. And I quote, Z, please have the director call me, not James or Tony or Jim, have him call me tonight. I'm sitting here with my father, and we would like to understand why the commitment made has not been fulfilled. And Z, if I get a call or text from anyone involved in this other than you, Zhang or the chairman, I will make certain that between the man sitting next to me and every person he knows and my ability to forever hold a grudge, that you will regret not following my direction. And I am sitting here waiting for the call with my father, end quote. That's a fact. I didn't make that up. That's not my opinion. That's not rhetoric. Is this, this is a message from Hunter Biden's WhatsApp app, correct?
It's from a search warrant from an Apple iCloud backup. Yes.
From where? From whose phone? My phone, your phone?
It was from Hunter Biden.
Okay, thank you, sir. I
Wasn't
didn't
from
mean
his
to be
phone, But it
disrespectful.
was from Hunter Biden device.
Yes, okay, thank you. But it was linked to Hunter Biden, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, Mr. Shapley, were the Bidens contemplating a deal with CEFC in July 2017 timeframe?
So I would just have to stick to what was in my transcript. I don't know if I really described that.
And then
Have you?
I think that's a portion of the
Okay.
WhatsApp message. However, I do believe there's a full chain that if it's relevant, we can turn that over to the House Ways and Means Committee, and they can decide to vote to release that to you.
That would be appreciated. I just wanted to give, in my limited time, just to set the stage. One person has come forward, Tony Bobulinski, I believe, has alleged that the Bidens were contemplating a deal with CEFC even earlier than 2017, and he's come forward and said that. Is Tony Bobulinski the Tony referenced in the WhatsApp? I'm trying to connect
Yeah,
the dots.
I think we need to stick to the transcript, and I think in my testimony, I referenced Sinohawk, the Sinohawk deal, and we know that that deal never went through, and that relates to CEFC in China.
Okay, so the Tony that he's referencing, do you believe that to be Tony Bobulinski? Or
So in my transcript, I did not mention anything regarding Tony Bobulinski, but what I can do, again, is provide any information that I have related to him over to
Please.
the House Ways and Means Committee.
Thank you so much. And then the reference to James, is there a reference to James in there? Is that James Gilliar, another Biden associate?
Again,
We might have to get that one too. That's okay. And again, I think it's just critical that we stick to the facts and not my opinion. So I appreciate the fact that you're only speaking with fact, not on a partisan basis.
absolutely.
But if you could get those, that would help. Because in another message, Zaho responds to the earlier message, copy, I will call you on WhatsApp, and Hunter writes back, oh, my friend. Okay, my friend, I am sitting here waiting for the call with my father. Again, my concern is the ability to tell the truth, right? The cover-up is always worse than the crime. How many times did we hear Joe Biden say, not involved, not involved, not involved, I have no idea, yet his son says he's sitting right there while he's making these alleged influence peddling. So, Mr. Shapley, what do these messages indicate to you? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, they indicate that we needed to take additional investigative steps to find out what the facts and circumstances were of this WhatsApp message, and we just simply, it was not supported.
Can you explain to us, what do you mean it wasn't supported?
So Special Agent Ziegler, I mean, spoke
Yeah,
about
as a
it
normal part of a tax investigation, you want to understand why individuals are earning money. If someone's paid a significant amount of money, in order for that to be income, not a gift, not a loan, you need to understand the substance to why that person is paying them, and that's why you need to understand the four corners of that transaction.
Sure. And that's standard operating procedure that is usually held for normal members of society. I mean, that's standard operating procedure, but what you're telling me is you weren't able to pursue that. Correct?
That's correct.
I am out of time. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you again.
Chair recognizes Mr. Burchett from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. Thank you all for being here. When I was a younger man, the country wasn't going too well, and one night it really culminated in something, and I remember my daddy praying, said, Lord, at the blessing, he just said, Lord, please don't let us lose our country. That's the prayer I'll be making tonight after hearing this testimony, because this just really, it sickens me. And Mr. Ziegler, I know you're a man of faith. Mr. Shapley, I guess after tonight, maybe you are or you aren't. I'm not sure where it will drive you, but I will be remembering y'all in my prayers. And Mr. Ziegler, and I appreciate y'all's incredible courage. It takes a lot of guts to get up here and put your families and your spouses through all this garbage, and it's not right. And thank y'all. Sincerely.
I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. Mr. Ziegler, it's also come to my attention that today, after this hearing was already underway, apparently Oppo research is circulating from, quote, Hunter Biden's legal team, unquote, suggestions that you had leaked SARS and other investigative information to someone who had released that information online. Is there a statement that you'd like to make about whether you have leaked any investigative information to someone to reveal on the internet? And I'm sure Hunter Biden's legal team, who's obviously watching right now, and these dirtbags are trying to smear you through the press, and it's disgusting. And I'd appreciate hearing a direct answer from you, brother.
So there's two parts to this. There was that release of that bank report. My name was listed in there. So my name was out in the public as one of the IRS agents working this case, and that was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So that came out. And then on top of that, me and my husband were in a report that's out on social media, on Twitter, by a person with the same last name that I have, who I've never met, I've never turned over information to. We just happen to have the same last name, okay?
Right.
I was, for my sexuality, my sexual orientation, my husband was put out there, like information related to me. So it was in an effort to discredit me, that I'm this person working for the liberal side and I must be a plant. And it was awful, the things that they were saying about me. But I can tell you that I've never turned over any information regarding this case to anyone related to that Marco Polo report or someone with the same last name that I have.
Thank you, and I appreciate that, and I'm sorry
Thank you so much, sir.
You and your husband had to go through all that misery. Mr. Ziegler, also, how much do you think Hunter Biden and his business associates receive from the Burisma board?
I'm gonna need to refer to my transcripts, so if you give me 2
How about this? How about if I just help you out? $666,667. Does that sound about right?
So is that a monthly transfer?
I'm not sure. I just, well, if it's a monthly transfer, I'm in the wrong
Yeah,
line
so
of work.
Burisma paid to everyone involved $6.5 million.
Okay, okay. And when did Hunter leave the Burisma board?
Can you hold on 1 second?
Sure.
It's not in the confines of my transcript, so that would be something I'd have to turn over to the House Ways and Means.
I'd like to get that. Was the money you think received from Burisma sent directly to Hunter Biden in 2014 and 15?
It was not. It was sent to an entity called Rosemont Seneca Bohai.
Okay. Why would they do that? And why would they why would they send it to his business partner, Devin Archer, was it, and all that?
So I can talk about my normal experience, what I've, hold on 1 second.
Can you give me a couple seconds?
So I can provide this in an additional testimony to the House Ways and Means Committee to explain that.
Okay, I'd like to get that. Mr. Ziegler, also, Rosemont Seneca Bohai, they didn't do anything. They didn't produce anything. Skinny Atlas, they didn't obviously do anything. Owasco did not do anything. Hudson West 3 didn't do anything. But are all these Hunter Biden affiliated companies, to your best of your recollection?
I believe I referenced in my testimony that I knew of those, but I didn't reference how I knew of them.
Okay. Well, I guess, and I should have directed that at Mr. Shapley, I believe, but my point is, you're familiar with these companies, but have you been able to identify what the Bidens did here in the business of selling, or what they did with these companies? Either one of y'all, Mr. Shapley.
Again, I'm going to have to, the response to that, the reason why some of these payments were received, we can turn over as a part of an additional testimony.
I guess my point is they didn't sell tough steaks or crappy ties. They sold influence, in my opinion. And I'm out of time, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. I would like to close and say, if a buddy of mine, Rob Delosier, texted me during all this and said, I hope y'all get to the bottom of this, and I hope y'all do something about it. So that would be my wish for this committee. Thank you guys so much. God
That's
bless
the
you.
goal. Thank you. Chair now recognizes Mr. Fry for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ziegler, Mr. Shapley, were you able to pursue this investigation in areas that may implicate the president's involvement in his family's businesses?
We were hindered from following that line of investigative steps.
Would you echo that, Mr. Ziegler?
Yeah, specifically in my testimony, I referenced the campaign.
In 2020, President Biden, candidate Biden at the time, said during a debate, and I'm going to quote, "My son has not made any money in terms of this thing about, what are you talking about, China? I have not had, the only guy who made money from China is this guy, Donald Trump. He's the only one. Nobody else has made any money from China." Mr. Ziegler, was the president telling the truth when he said that his son, Hunter Biden, had not made any money from China?
So I don't know what the president at the time was thinking, but what I can tell you based on what I testified in my transcript, that he did earn money from China.
Right, and in March of 2023, just a couple months ago, the committee showed through bank records that Hunter Biden, the president's son, James Biden, Hallie Biden, all received money originating from China, funneled through Robinson Walker LLC, a company owned by Rob Walker, who's a well-known Biden associate. When presented with this evidence by a reporter, the president said, "That's not true." Mr. Ziegler, is it true that the president's family received money originating from China, which was funneled through the Robinson Walker account?
That is correct.
As it pertains to the Hunter Biden investigation, Mr. Shapley, you sat on a meeting on October 7th, 2022 with Mr. Weiss. You testified to that, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And later this year, on June 7th, Mr. Weiss publicly stated in a letter to the Judiciary Committee the following, quote, "As the Attorney General has stated, I have been granted ultimate authority over this matter, including responsibility for deciding where, when, and whether to file charges," end quote. That statement is dramatically inconsistent with your recollection of a meeting that happened in October of 2022. Is that correct?
Yes, it corroborated documentation of that meeting clearly shows that that's not accurate.
How is that not accurate from your recollection of that meeting?
Because during that meeting, United States Attorney Weiss said that he, wasn't a deciding person, said it right out, and he further went in that the Department of Justice Tax Division had to approve any charges first, to which, as of March 16th, 2023, we know that they had not approved anything yet. He further goes and says the DC U.S. Attorney had declined to allow charges to be brought there, and that he requested special counsel authority around that time and was denied and was told to follow the process. That process would lead him to another President Biden-appointed U.S. Attorney in the Central District of California, and he told us at that meeting on October 7, 2022, that if California declined it, that he would have to request a special authority again.
Right, so during that meeting and in subsequent letters that Mr. Weiss produced to both Senator Graham and to the Judiciary Committee, he seems to corroborate that meeting or some of the facts from that meeting that maybe he didn't have that authority, right?
So, yes, the second letter on June 30th clearly shows that he's saying that he has full authority, he has ultimate authority.
Right.
He immediately goes in and says that, but my authority is geographically limited. I don't understand how you can conclude any way from that statement in the June 30th letter that he has full authority.
Correct.
It's just simply not accurate.
Correct, and that was something that you saw early on, or y'all saw as a potential problem. Mr. Ziegler, if the U.S. Attorney Weiss could not gain special counsel authority, what options remained in bringing charges against Hunter Biden in California or in the District of Columbia?
So I guess it would have been the special attorney authority that I've seen recently referenced. But I mean, essentially when DC said no, and we know that DC said no, we were having conversations with our FBI counterparts of how do we bring in a special counsel into this situation. I think that once we knew that there was going to be potential problems with going to President Biden appointees with moving this case forward, we were actively trying to figure out how as agents do we get that to happen. And still to this day, there is not a special counsel assigned to this investigation.
Right, so the approach was, and I got to go quickly here, but the approach was to go to D.C. With Matthew Graves, where he was not able to bring charges under a Biden appointee. He went to the Central District of California. Mr. Estrada was not able to bring charges. So to both of you, in conclusion, in relation to the U.S. Attorney's inability to obtain that special counsel authority and bring these cases in either California or D.C., do you agree with Attorney General Garland's testimony that, quote, the United States Attorney Weiss has been advised that he has full authority to bring cases in other districts if he needs to do that?
I don't believe that's accurate.
And I think the key word there is he has, and I don't think that that's accurate, and I think that that's refuted in the later letter by U.S. Attorney David Weiss.
Thank you both. In conclusion, thank you both for being here, for your bravery in testifying today. I know it's not been easy on you or your family, but the American people and this committee appreciate the work that you do, that you continue to do, and the truth that you're shedding light on. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Yield back. Chair recognizes Mr. Edwards from North Carolina for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Ziegler, did you ever ask for access to Hunter Biden's laptop in your investigation?
I do recall asking for access, yes.
And were you granted that access?
I don't believe that that's in the confines of my transcript. So I do know, so when we're talking about—
Did you look at the laptop?
So I can jump in there because I documented a meeting where we had this discussion, and it was included in my House Ways and Means Committee transcript. And Special Agent Ziegler asked multiple times that he had certain pieces, certain downloads from the devices, but he did not have access to all of them. And that's when Leslie Wolf said that, well, that's because prosecutors decided not to give it to you all.
So you effectively were denied access. Mr. Shapley, in your interview with the Ways and Means Committee, you stated the following regarding efforts to obtain a search warrant for, at the time, former Vice President Biden's guest house. We talked about the storage unit earlier. Let's talk about the guest house now, where Hunter Biden had been staying, and Assistant U.S. Attorney Leslie Wolf's assessment of the situation regarding the likelihood of such a warrant being approved. There was more than enough probable cause for the physical search warrant there, but the question was whether the juice was worth the squeeze, and I find this in quotes. She continued that optics were a driving factor in the decision on whether to execute a search warrant. She said a lot of evidence in our investigation would be found in the guest house of former Vice President Biden, but said that there's no way that we'll get it approved. I open this question to both of you. In the course of your distinguished careers at the IRS, has a DOJ official ever attempted to argue against the execution of a search warrant while acknowledging that such a warrant being carried out would likely yield positive evidentiary results for the investigation? Mr. Shapley.
So my response would be that an argument wouldn't be required. It would be discussion with the investigators working with the prosecutors, and if you weren't on the same page, then you just simply, would move on. And with the circumstances of probable cause being achieved and knowing evidence was there, I don't know how she could have not allowed us to execute that search warrant.
And I mean, it goes further, and even to the storage unit. When you talk about access to something and you're relying now on them to turn the records over to you versus you having access to those records, they're not being potentially destroyed. I mean, there's a multitude of reasons why you'd want to execute a search warrant.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to share some thoughts. This hearing is much like arguing with my wife. We start out on a topic, and then we go in all kinds of different directions, and it seems like that is what I'm hearing, at least from the other side today. And I've heard over and over that President Biden has not been implicated or proven for any wrongdoing here. And I acknowledge that for now, but I know that it is the intent of this Oversight Committee to continue to look at the evidence that we have here. The issue at hand, however, is that it is Joe Biden's son that is the target of this and seems to have had preferential treatment on a number of levels. The investigators were denied access to the laptop. The Biden family was tipped off with the warrant on the storage unit, and the investigators were denied access to the guest house, even knowing that or suspecting that there was evidential or evidence in that. And that is what concerns the American people. That's the real two-tier justice system that we see here. It's not that Joe Biden has been proven to do anything wrong yet. It's that Joe Biden's son has received preferential treatment through the Department of Justice. I think that's a shame, and I appreciate these gentlemen being here to share their brave story with the American people. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Langworthy from North Carolina, or from New York. Buffalo, New York. I've been to his place. Buffalo, New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to these two very brave whistleblowers for what's been a very grueling hearing today. And I just am very grateful for openly testifying in front of everyone. And this must be challenging despite your providing accurate and credible testimony. But that goes directly to my point. I think it's important to sum up a few things. So I just want to ask a series of questions to you, Mr. Shapley and Mr. Ziegler. It is true that you provided testimony to the House Ways and Means Committee, correct?
That is correct.
And how long did each of your interviews last?
So around seven hours?
Yeah, a little bit more than 6-7 hours.
6 or 7 hours.
Okay. And when did those interviews occur?
Mine was late May of
June
2023.
1st?
Of this year?
Yeah.
Were Democratic staff present during your interviews, and did they question you?
Yes, they did.
Democratic staff was present, and actually the Chairman Smith was present at my testimony.
Did you give your testimony knowing that you could be criminally prosecuted if you lied to Congress?
Yes, I did.
Yes, I did.
Now, how long has your testimony been public for the American people to read?
For the last 3+ weeks, probably.
Yeah, around 3 weeks.
Okay.
4 weeks.
And you've been questioned by both Republican and Democratic members today, correct?
That's correct.
That is correct.
Okay. Now, given all that you have just told us, you gave over 15 combined hours of testimony to the Ways and Means, hours of public testimony today, and these facts have been public now for weeks. And yet, not one single person has been able to contradict a single fact about your testimony. That's incredible, because it's that impressive. And that speaks to your credibility, your attention to detail as investigators, and now as whistleblowers. The attacks you hear today aren't actually because of your testimony. They're Democratic talking points meant to protect the Bidens, just like the DOJ and the IRS. Your testimony speaks for itself and is powerful, and I am so glad you were willing to voluntarily come in today. And that's why, Mr. Chairman, I am so pleased that you held this hearing today and show yet another example of why this committee must continue this investigation into these matters. And I'm proud to yield back.
Gentleman yields back.
Can I say something real quick regarding what he just? So one of the topics that was brought up over here regarding the 99-page Pross memo, and then that there was discretion given in there. From what I understand, discretion, there is also language that I have seen included in DOJ tax memos that references the need to charge the felony, that you have to charge the felony, essentially. So I would ask Congress, when Mr. Weiss comes to testify here, what did that, at that point in time, what did that memo say? In August, when he got it from his team, what did that memo say? Did it approve felony and misdemeanor charges? And then what happened to that after? That, I think, is crucial for you guys to understand.
Thank you. Mr. I've just got a little time left. Mr. Shapley, do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
Yeah, just to add on to that, the Department of Justice Tax Division has a policy called the major count policy, and that basically mirrors what Special Agent Ziegler is saying. They actually teach it when they come out to speak to agents and provide training to agents. And that major count policy is that that it has to, they have to charge a felony. They can't just plead away the felony just to get out of a potential trial. They can't just rely on charging a misdemeanor or giving someone a misdemeanor when there's felony charges on the table. And as we've said all along, we've shown all along that these prosecutors agreed with multiple felonies and none of them were charged.
And I have one more thing to add to that. We were always, and I go back to last spring, David Weiss is going to do the right thing. He is absolutely going to do the right thing. Let's hold off. We're moving forward. We get to August and we get approval or recommended approval for the felony and misdemeanor charges. So how do we end up where we're at today? And I just don't know.
Gentlemen, would you yield your last 30 seconds?
I would be glad to.
And we were told the same thing about Mr. Weiss as well. So we share your disappointment. Mr. Ziegler, you said there were foreign documents related to this matter, related to the investigation.
Yes.
Would you provide those documents to the committee?
Yeah, I can provide those documents to the Ways and Means Committee.
Thank you.
Just like a normal process for obtaining foreign documents, correspondent bank requests. So you can actually request those corresponding wires, and that's a step that you can take in getting foreign money transfers.
Would you also provide the full Rob Walker transcript?
So I will consult with my attorney, and we will turn that over to the House Ways and Means Committee.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes Mr. Burleson from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good news, I'm the last one.
Next to last.
Next to last. So I want to reiterate, thank you for your bravery. Thank you for what you're doing. I think the American people should be pissed. They should be very angry about this. No one gets away with not paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes and having just blown over or been turned into a misdemeanor charge, especially when you have other criminal activity involved. And you know what's funny? This hearing, no one denied the facts that he's guilty of this stuff, right? We all know he's guilty. The question is, I think the question at hand is, to what extent was his father aware? In a way, it's kind of like Schrodinger's cat. Either he was aware of what's going on, and he knew what his son was doing, and he was involved, or he wasn't. Or maybe he was completely clueless, absent-minded, whatever, unaware of what his family was doing. But one or the other is the truth. You can't come to any other conclusion other than that. And the problem is, you were not able to determine or lift that box, the Schrodinger cat box, and determine is the cat dead or not? Was Joe Biden truly involved or not? So Mr. Shapley, or Mr. Ziegler, throughout the investigation, what investigative steps that would have involved Joe Biden would you have liked to have pursued but were unable to?
So I guess in my testimony, I talked about the atmosphere when we're interviewing witnesses and talking about specific areas or specific, it being the campaign, that we were prevented, there was rolling eyes at us. I mean, it was a very harsh environment to be in.
And you were directly turned down as well.
So there were situations to where I was not able to ask certain questions, yes.
So you weren't able to lift the box and find out what's underneath?
There were certain, in our investigation, you want to follow the facts. That's a part of our job, is you follow the evidence and you work the case.
So I know that you were tipped off about the storage, or it was tipped off about the storage unit before you were able to actually search it. What were you, can you say what you were looking for? What evidence? Because you've built up to this point, and then now you know there's strong indication that there's something there.
So I believe in Gary's testimony, there was that he moved his prior office. So he, being Hunter, moved his prior office into that storage unit.
And so this was off computers,
Yeah, I don't
files?
know specifically
Okay.
what would have been in there.
Okay. Besides any tax crimes, what other violations were being investigated by any other agencies?
So those aren't in the confines of our testimony. What other charges are being invested,
Were-
any
but-
offshoots, but
Were there other agencies that were working with you that were working on other?
yeah, there was, FBI was working this case with us.
Okay, so but you can't speak to whether there was a Foreign Agent Registration Act or,
I cannot speak to that.
okay. My other
But what I
question,
can tell you is, not only do we investigate tax crimes, but we also investigate money laundering. So any instances of money laundering, us as IRS agents, we are allowed to investigate those crimes.
okay.
So, Mr. Congressman, if I could add, so in my transcript, I do say that there's a FARA issue at play during the investigation.
Okay, so there was a FARA issue, a Foreign Agent Registration Act issue. And is that been pursued?
We are not a part of the investigation anymore, so, and I mean, that's our whole point of a special counsel. If there's these offshoot investigations, we're going to just rely on the same thing to happen.
In your investigations, you knew that there was foreign bank accounts or foreign money wires. Are you aware if the Biden family has or they own foreign bank accounts, and do you have the ability to get access to those?
So any records that I would have related to that, I can turn over to the House Ways and Means Committee, and then they could vote to release that.
Thank you. Thank you. I yield back the remainder of my time.
Were you all ever given access to the Form 1023 that alleged Joe Biden and Hunter Biden were a part of a bribery scheme with Ukraine? The reason I ask that is because that allegation is consistent. The way that the oligarch claimed he gave the Bidens the bribe is consistent with what we've seen in Romania and other countries where they set up all these shell companies and then they launder the money through the shell companies back down to different Biden family members. So I wondered if you knew about that form before it became public.
So I can speak to that. So in my original transcript, I wouldn't have been able to say that I knew anything about 1023, but I provided a supplement after I saw open source information from the former Attorney General Bill Barr that said that he saw this document and they sent it to Delaware for further investigation. And the team, as far to the best of my knowledge, never saw that document.
So the team that was in charge of investigating the Biden family for tax crimes never received the FBI document that alleged Joe Biden was involved in a bribery scheme.
You know, for the IRS investigators on the case, the answer is no.
Is that odd? I mean, everybody knew you were investigating the Bidens for at least tax evasion.
Generally speaking, if there's any types of money coming in and there's a criminal tax investigation ongoing, I don't see how that information could be withheld from the investigators.
And I can tell you, and I can provide this in my testimony, but like there's things that are contained on that document that could further corroborate other information that we might be having an issue corroborating because it could be regarding a foreign official. So if we have information regarding that in a document or a witness, we can further corroborate later evidence. And like I said, if that's something that we have, we can turn that over to the House Ways and Means Committee.
Thank you. Thank you. Chair recognizes Ms. Luna from Florida.
Mr. Shapley, did the FBI first learn of the Delaware computer shop processing a laptop that allegedly belonged to Hunter Biden and contained evidence of potential crimes in October of 2019?
Did the FBI first learn of it?
Yes.
I don't know if I speak about who first learned of it.
Okay. The answer would be yes, but thank you. And isn't it true that the FBI verified the laptop's authenticity in November of 2019 by matching the device number against Hunter Biden's iCloud account?
Yeah, I believe that's in my transcript, and that's accurate.
Correct, transcript 12. The FBI analyzed the computer, correct? There was a report that the transcript 12. The FBI analyzed the computer, correct? There was a report that the FBI CART team analysis had taken place?
Can you point to just a page in my transcript so that
Page 12.
Okay, page 12.
Or transcript 12.
So could you repeat the question, please?
Just isn't it true that the FBI verified the laptop's authenticity in November of 2019 by matching the device number against Hunter Biden's iCloud account?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And they performed an FBI CART team analysis?
Yes, that's yes.
Mr. Ziegler, did you see this report?
I don't think that I talked about that in my transcript.
Correct. I'm assuming that that was probably very frustrating, being that you were conducting an investigation.
So I can speak to this again because I did contemporaneously document a long meeting about the laptop, and Special Agent Ziegler confirmed in that, and it was released in House Ways and Means Committee testimony, that he pointed out individual pieces of data that he was provided, and then he asked why he hadn't seen other pieces of data. And that's when Assistant United States Attorney Wolf told them that prosecutors were withholding information from the investigators.
And I think what's important with withholding, they never said what they were withholding. So I think that is like important.
So to my understanding, the U.S. Attorney said that you haven't seen it because for a variety of reasons, they kept it from the agents. So they kept this information from you. I think it's important to know, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Isn't it relevant evidence for you and your team to review, Mr. Ziegler, that this type of evidence would help you to conduct your investigation?
So in an everyday normal investigation, you would want to know, you're the investigators, we're the ones that are supposed to process the information and provide the relevant information to the prosecutors. So we should know absolutely everything that we're looking at because we might testify to it one day.
So it's safe to say that it's not a normal practice to withhold evidence from agents reviewing a case.
It's not a normal practice to withhold and not tell us what you're withholding from us.
Do you know who made that decision to withhold information from the agents?
That I do not know, and
Okay.
it's not in my transcript.
Okay. Mr. Shapley, and your team are learning about the existence of this information, and you are being denied information at the same time. And this is October 2020, correct? Time frame?
Yes.
At that same time, did you remember Hunter Biden's laptop being discussed or rather suppressed by the media?
I generally remember the discussion of the laptop. I think everybody heard about the laptop. I don't know if I knew about the media suppressing it.
So I think it's important to note that the FBI learns about the laptop in 2019. That's 2019, not 2020. And in fact, the FBI authenticated the laptop in November of 2019, then takes possession of the laptop, does analysis, but these analyses and information are not provided to you guys, the IRS agents conducting the case. Mind you, the folks running the nuts and bolts of the criminal tax fraud case. They're learning about all this information and yet at the same time being denied access to it. Meanwhile, the media is actively working to suppress that. And at the same time, 51 national security officials sign on to a letter saying that the FBI, of which the FBI has authenticated, saying that it is Russian disinformation. This is, mind you, Joe Biden's son, which I think it's important to note that many of my colleagues try to make this about race and saying that there's a two-tier justice system for black and brown people, and yet we are investigating, according to their terms, a man of white privilege who is being aided and abetted by this administration and being criminally covered for by the Department of Justice, and yet somehow that's not supposed to be a topic of discussion. I have 41 seconds left. Would you guys like to say anything for the record so the American people can know what's really happening in this country?
So I do have something. So there's two things. I believe that AUSA Leslie Wolf and U.S. Attorney David Weiss would say phenomenal things about my work, and I know they have said that. They have said that we did a great job in this investigation. I want to make that clear to everyone, that this isn't, we're not disgruntled, we're not out here to get people. We're here for accountability and that we learn from this. That's the most important part of why we're here.
Well, you are doing great, and I know that you are not conservative. I know you're not a Republican, but I will say this. Thank you for at least bringing faith back to some part of the IRS so that people understand that just because your last name is Biden does not mean that you're held above the law. So thank you. Chairman, I yield my time.
The gentlelady yields back, and that concludes our questions. Again, I want to thank you all for being here. I'm going to yield to the much improved ranking member, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez from New York, for a closing statement.
I'll take the gold star. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah. And I'd like to thank our witnesses here today. Once again, we acknowledge fully that this is not easy and that your respect, your service and your public service here is respected and acknowledged and valued. So thank you. Thank you for your testimony. I think it is important for us to, summarize much of what we heard and saw today. And overall, what this matter is about. A U.S. attorney, handpicked by Attorney General Barr, has for 4 years investigated, together with a dozen agents and at least 4 prosecutors from his office and the tax division of the Department of Justice, the son of President Biden. Hunter Biden has been charged with a felony and misdemeanors, and 2 misdemeanors, and he is pleading guilty to several crimes and submitting to sentencing by an appointed judge, a Trump-appointed judge. However, we are also seeing today is an effort to find some issue with this prosecution, this existing prosecution. This is a person who has admitted to crimes, and finding evidence of political interference, a very serious charge. So much of what we saw today honed in on a conversation, the testimony honed in on a conversation that one of today's witnesses was involved in which Mr. Shapley heard Mr. Weiss to say that he was denied special counsel status. That account had been contradicted by the U.S. Attorney Weiss, who has reiterated several times that he had full authority to bring any charges in any district and had received assurances from the Department of Justice that if he needed special attorney status, not counsel, but rather attorney status to bring those charges, it would be granted. So we are left here with 2 possible options for this story. That either Mr. Weiss, who was appointed by President Donald J. Trump and trusted by Attorney General Barr, also serving under Trump, was lying to protect the Biden administration, or he respectfully disagreed with the charges that today's 2 witnesses wanted to bring as professionals in their professional opinion. Disagreement over charges is not uncommon. The IRS criminal tax counsel attorneys have disagreed in charging decisions, as we heard here today, 90% of the time. And in this particular case, reviewing attorneys at IRS and the tax division raised issues with the proposed charges. And the witnesses described how Mr. Weiss expressed some concerns about the charges. In fact, in some of the testimony we saw, Mr. Shapley recognized with regard to at least one of the charges which he himself recommended he could, and I am quoting from testimony, quote, see some issues with that would preclude it from being charged. Now, I understand why the 2 witnesses who testified here today are disappointed after 5 years of investigation. I believe you all are honorable, serving professionals, truly. And that Mr. Weiss disagreed with this analysis of facts. There was absolutely frustration that to not, quote, have a seat at the table, that Mr. Weiss made his decision about how to charge in this case, and he did charge. And that was a decision that he, as the U.S. attorney in charge of the case, was empowered to make. The question, though, I believe, that is very important to address is why we are holding these hearings today, despite what we have seen as deliberate lobbying for this hearing by a political candidate, Donald J. Trump. What we also saw today was the revival of certain conspiracy theories around Ukraine, first promoted by Rudy Giuliani during Trump's first impeachment in 2019 and his reelection campaign. We did not bring that up. That was first brought up by the Republican side that required addressing here today. Chairman Comer started this hearing by asking these witnesses about Burisma, and other members of the committee again raised the specter of these debunked conspiracy theories. It has been debunked time and time again, including by Trump's own Department of Justice. But that being said, this is the problem with bringing these conspiracy theories into this committee. They beget more. It does not stop. And today we have gotten a new conspiracy theory, one that requires us to believe that David Weiss, a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney, trusted by Trump-appointed Attorney General Barr, has somehow been complicit in abetting and concealing a deep state conspiracy to protect Hunter Biden on behalf of the Biden administration when they were selected by Donald Trump. This is a theory which has apparently been proven unsuccessful, given that Hunter Biden is now criminally charged and facing sentencing by a Trump-appointed judge. Today also marked a new low when pornographic images were paraded in this hearing room. Chairman Comer, last October, you told Time magazine that you were not interested in the sordid details of Hunter Biden's life. You were quoted as saying, quote, "That's counter to a credible investigation," and I agree. Sadly, that is a reflection of how low some individuals here have been willing to go in their efforts to attack the president and his family, and frankly, I don't care who you are in this country, no one deserves that. It is abuse. It is abusive. If Republicans truly want to get to the fact here, and they want to understand why Mr. Weiss decided to charge Hunter Biden the way he did, let's hear from Mr. Weiss. But until then, we must move on from these theories and focus on the issues that matter to the American people, like ending the scourge of gun violence that is plaguing our country, confronting and combating the climate crisis, and standing up for our constitutional rights, and yes, going after the enormous amount of inequity and injustice in our tax system. And with that, I yield back to the chair.
Gentlelady yields back. Before I close, I want to ask for unanimous consent to enter into the record 3 letters from myself, Judiciary Chair Jordan, and Ways and Means Chair Smith, to the Director of Secret Service, Director of the IRS, and the Attorney General, requesting more information pertaining to our investigation. Without objection, so ordered, as well as enter into the record the 2 bank memorandums that we've already submitted to our friends in the media that we're trying to teach financial literacy to. I'd like to enter those 2 memorandums into the record. Again, I want to thank you all so much for what you've done today. I can't imagine what you've been through. I apologize for what you have been through. This is what this committee is all about. The mission for the House Oversight Committee is to identify and root out waste, fraud, abuse, and mismanagement in the federal government. To do that, we depend on whistleblowers. Whistleblowers coming forward and telling their story. And that's what you all have done. And to think that there are people on the committee who have tried to question your credibility it's a pretty low mark for the history of the House Oversight Committee. So again, thank you. And what we learned today, let's just go back 6 months when this investigation started, when we became the majority. The laptop, according to many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle and many of our friends in the media, was Russian disinformation. And what we now know is the laptop contained many of the financial records, the financial documents, the communications between both the president as well as other members of his family, with many of these associates, with many of these foreign nationals. So there's a clear path of evidence. I say that investigating the Biden family influence peddling is like investigating a bleeding bear through a snowstorm. There's so much evidence laying around. We've confirmed today what we've been saying in this committee for several months, that the Bidens took in over $10 million, $17.3 million to be exact, from adversaries. We have no earthly idea what they did to receive that money. I think that's concerning to every American. We have evidence that Hunter Biden spoke to his father about his businesses, and that Hunter used his father's name to shake down the Chinese Communist Party backed person. We saw that in the WhatsApp message that you all released. We've seen that in other emails and correspondence from the laptop. We learned, unfortunately, that these brave, incredible whistleblowers have been retaliated against at the IRS and intimidated by the Biden shady legal team and their lapdogs in the press. And for that, I apologize, and I hope that that does not deter other brave, incredible whistleblowers from coming forward. You know, all roads lead to Joe Biden, the big guy, the guy who was set to go in business with the Chinese Communist Party linked entity that wired money to the Biden family, as well as to Gal Luft, who was mentioned earlier by one of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. Joe Biden was even set to share office space, according to an email, with this Chinese Communist Communist Party-backed entity. And that's a concern. That should be a concern to every American, because whether you're Republican or Democrat, whether you're rural or urban, one thing that we can agree on is that Americans detest public corruption. That's why we have an IRS. That's why we have an IRS criminal division. That's why we have an oversight committee. That's why we have an ethics committee. That's why we're supposed to have a judicial system in America that provides equal justice for all. But we have to work together, and we have to be honest, and we have to respect our checks and balances. And what we learned today, as troubling as anything, is that your investigation that you spent years of your life on, that we've spent 6 months investigating, where you see a pattern of suspicious activity, where money flows from shady foreign companies and from shady foreign nationals through shell companies that are then laundered, and that's according to 6 different banks in the suspicious activity reports, laundered down in incremental payments to the Biden family for things that we have no idea what they did to receive the money. And as part of that years-long investigation, the FBI is sitting on the whole time a document that alleges Joe Biden and Hunter Biden took a $5 million bribe from a Ukrainian oligarch, where there are bank records that show that the Bidens were receiving money from this entity. There was already evidence there to show that. Now, I don't know whether that allegation is true or not. I know the FBI never investigated it, and what we know from today, they never communicated with the IRS criminal division that spent years investigating this. So there's 2 things that's happening here with the Oversight Committee with respect to the President of the United States. There's the investigation of the Biden corruption, and there's the investigation of the cover-up. Again, I want to thank you all for the work that you have done over the years. We appreciate that. The American people appreciate that. The taxpayers appreciate that. And we look forward to receiving the additional information through the Ways and Means Committee, through the proper process, as we continue our investigation. With that,